Welcome to Keep What You Earn, your judgment and jargon-free zone for entrepreneurs of all levels. Get ready to learn how to scale your business, save money in taxes, and create a business that grows your wealth. If it feels like the financial side of business is like eating your vegetables, well, then think of this podcast as the ranch dressing to make the process a little more enjoyable. My name is Shannon Weinstein. I'm a CPA and business owner on a mission to simplify money and empower others through knowledge. I hope this episode inspires you to take action, but remember that the information we share is for educational purposes only and is not individual tax advice. Now that we got that out of the way, let's start the show. One of the things that generates the most fear is uncertainty, right? Uncertainty on what's next, on what's to come, on the risks you're about to take, on the decision you're about to make. And that's what can hold us back from stepping into a new chapter, right? We're stuck in our comfort zone. We're stuck in the routine. We're stuck in the known because maybe tolerating the known is better than exploring the unknown. And I know that there are a lot of people struggling with this. And it's not just in the context of today's episode, which is around relationships, divorce, marriage. It's also in business. It's also in any type of aspect of relationships in life where you know that you're meant to shed this old chapter and move on, and that time is limited, and you've got to make a decision on what is really going to serve you best in the future. We're also going to unpack on today's episode managing finances. What is it like as a couple managing finances? How do you talk to your loved one, your spouse, your family about money in an effective way, especially when both have this deep rooted fear of money? I'm really excited for this conversation because it was so much fun to chat with Renee Bauer, who is a friend, and she's also the host of the She Who Wins Summit, which I recently attended here in Connecticut. And Renee is an award winning divorce attorney, published author, and founder of Happy Even After Family Law. She's got over 2 decades of experience and is committed to empowering all women to redefine their sense of peace and purpose in their new life. Her insights are sought after by national and international media outlets, podcasts, and conferences where she speaks on entrepreneurship and women empowerment. As an accomplished litigator, she boldly educates and inspires women to reclaim their right to happiness. She's the host of the She Who Wins Summit, and her book by the same name will be released in 2023. You're going to learn more about it here and how you can pre order a copy of her book. And Renee and I discuss all of these different elements of relationships, what she's seen through countless divorces she's overseen as a lawyer, and how you can best prepare your finances, whether it be in the context of marriage, in the context of business, any partnership, any relationship, or really any transition in your life where you are about to embark on a new journey, how you can best equip yourself for success. So let's hear from Renee. Welcome back to Keep What You Earn, Renee. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Shannon. We're gonna have fun today.
We are. We washed our hair today. We're ready to go.
We
We
did. That's a
did.
big day.
It is.
Like, that says a lot for you, like how I feel about you.
Exactly. Likewise. I'm like, I went ahead and it's a big deal. People don't understand that
Yeah.
planning your hair washing around something is a really big deal. That's basically a love language, isn't it?
It is.
So I'm excited to talk to you, Renee. For those who don't know you, tell us a bit about who you are. I would love for you to unpack a little bit of your story and how that relates to what you do today.
All right, I'll give you the Cliff Note version of it.
Sure.
So, I am a divorce attorney. I've been doing that for 20 years now. My office is located in Connecticut. Spent a lot of time litigating, representing men and women equally, and doing that work. However, in my own personal life, I'm also twice divorced. And when I was going through all of that personally, I was such a broken version of myself. So I'd go in as a lawyer, all buttoned up, suited up, click clacking down the hallway to court, do my job. And I was so disconnected from what was happening in my own life. And I would never talk about it. I didn't ever share it. I didn't ever tell colleagues I was divorced. I didn't tell clients because I'm like, oh, that's unprofessional. You don't do that.
Hmm.
But I found myself in one marriage that was a perfectly fine marriage. He is the father of my son. We have an amazing co-parenting relationship, but something was missing and it just didn't feel like this was going to be something that I wanted to stay in for it's we were disconnected, it wasn't fulfilling. And then the second one was extremely toxic. So when I actually started sharing my own divorce story, which was on a friend's podcast. I had never spoken about my divorce before. I had so much shame around it. She asked me questions about divorce, and I was shockingly surprised that I answered them. And it was probably the martinis that had something to do with it. But once I did, I got inundated with messages from other women that said, "Thank you for sharing your story. I don't feel so alone. I thought I was the only one who felt the shame around it or the embarrassment." And then I realized I need to start talking about this. I need to start sharing my story so that other men and women don't feel like this is the worst thing that's ever happened to them. It's just a moment in their life. So I am still a divorce attorney. And now I also run women's empowerment events. I have my own podcast. I have a book coming out very soon, and it's all about helping women find their voice, getting really comfortable with uncomfortable conversations, taking risk, being bold, and doing all of those things.
I love it. And I love that you chose to kind of expose your story in the name of like, well, actually, we're not alone. We actually all go through stuff like this. And a bit of background on how I know Renee. No, she is not my attorney. Don't get worried. But a bit of how I know Renee. This is so funny because you were talking and I was like, oh, there's my North Shore Boston accent coming out. And so Renee and I grew up a town away from each other and now live a town away from each other and just met now through.
In different states. You forgot that.
Oh, yeah, in
It's
different states, yeah. So, an hour no, a town away in Boston and then a town away down in Connecticut around the same time, and then what's funny is we met online.
yeah,
And I'm like,
go
"Wait,
figure.
you've been around me my whole life." So, okay, so let's talk about I know that you had your own story, your own journey, and, how was it I just wanna kinda, understand this too, like, how was it in dealing with these stories all I'm sure that you had people coming in as clients who were on all versions of the spectrum of, like horrible relationship that they were tearing apart, divorce versus the amicable splits, right? So how was seeing that every day and being surrounded by that energy, like did that affect you in any way or in terms of like exposing what was kind of going on for you or was there any relationship to it or did you really disconnect from this is my vocation and what I do and then this is my life and there's no intersect?
I think to some extent it was compartmentalized, but I also think having seen all of these unhappy relationships and seeing I think for me what was the most heartbreaking was the person who came in who was in this relationship that they weren't married to someone who was bad. There wasn't a
Mhm.
reason, right? Like usually it's easy. If you have substance abuse, that's an easy decision. If you have an affair, that's an easy decision. But it was the other people who didn't have a really good reason and just said, "You know what? We're not happy. This isn't what I imagined." Like we tried to do the work. We did the counseling, we did the things and just were so disconnected. And I think watching those people made a lot of them made the decision to stay. And a lot of it had to do with money or guilt. They didn't want to tell their parents or they didn't want to ruin their kids. And that for me was heartbreaking. And I looked at that situation because often they would come back years later and say, "Well, here we are again. The kids have graduated." And I'm like, wow, you just lost 10 years of your life because you were staying for the wrong reasons. And I didn't want to be that. And
Yeah.
so when I got to that place where I recognized, you know what, I don't think anything's going to change. We tried to do the work and I just think this is the way it is and we're not the best fit for each other. We met when we were young. That was for me like I can't stay in this situation. And then the second time around, having done all the work with all of the really bad stuff, I knew so fast. It was a really fast marriage. I knew really early on that like I had to get out of this because
Mhm.
there was not a happy ending. You could not fix this. You could not put a band-aid over it. And so I was able to pull the trigger really quickly. And that from marriage to divorce, that was a year and a half.
Yeah, and you told that story on stage at the summit, which by the way, Renee is the host of the She Who Wins Summit, which we just came back from just a few weeks ago. You're probably still like feeling the both the joy and exhaustion hangover from
Yeah.
that event. But yeah, you told that story on stage and it was like, holy shit. Like it was impactful and I appreciate you doing that. And you mentioned too the guilt, the shame, also the money. Like there's so many logical reasons to stay because your brain is trying to keep you safe, right? And it's like all of this is very uncomfortable. Like what if, what if, what if? And we were talking about this before we hit record. I love the idea of going in this direction of how do we prepare ourselves for what might come, right? Without without adopting pessimism in our own marriage, right? For people who are getting married, how can they prepare for a happy marriage, but also prepare for what might come? Because you never know who you're going to become and evolve into.
Yeah, and it's conversation and communication before you walk down the aisle. So when
Mhm.
I was leaving my first marriage, my ex is an accountant. He's a numbers guy. He did all the numbers. He had joy in doing them. So I'm like, I hate math. Okay, fine. But when it came down to me having to like understand what was happening in the marriage or leaving and having to set up my own household, I was in the dark because I wasn't actively involved. So that's what you don't do. And now what I tell people, they need to have these conversations really early on to understand how each party deals with money and how they have in the past. Like, for example, is someone a saver and someone a spender? And when you have that, that doesn't mean the marriage is destined for failure. It just means you have to have a conversation because what happens in that situation, the person who likes to save is going to get so upset and so resentful that their spouse is out spending and or the other way around. So having conversations and being able to say, okay, here's how this is going to work in our relationship in order to satisfy the person who likes to save as well as the person who likes to splurge a little bit and coming to an understanding that maybe some money's getting saved and then there's some discretionary spending that each of you get to do what you want with, which will bring us to another conversation about separate accounts. And
Mhm.
so the saver is going to continue to save in their account and the spender is going to, get the things that they want to get, but it's all about communication and conversation. Is someone coming to the relationship with debt? That's an important conversation to have. And how much debt and why? Is it school loan debt or is it a credit card debt that they haven't been able to pay off? And it has that is that a cycle. So it's getting in front of those things because what we do know is that money is usually the number one stressor and cause of divorce and marriages. So you want to get ahead of that and at least have those conversations and start to get really comfortable about not just having them once, having them on an ongoing or regular basis throughout your marriage too. So it never escalates to the point of resentment or to the point where you're consulting with a divorce attorney because it's so bad.
Right. And for some people, that communication and that conversation is actually very difficult because it's an uncomfortable conversation. Let's say you have, you know, I'll use husband and wife as the example, right? You have two people in a relationship who have the intention to get married, and neither one of them particularly likes the subject of money or talking about money. Maybe they have their own stories, right? What do you recommend for people to do to initiate that conversation or to just start kind of creating a pattern around that conversation that might be really uncomfortable and foreign to them?
Schedule it like you would a business meeting. So I'm currently married for a third time and happily so. But when we first got married, my husband and I put a date on the calendar where we would check in with each other on it happened to be a Sunday where we sit down and check in and say, okay, let's talk about whatever we need to talk about. Sometimes it was money, sometimes it was, whatever was on our mind, but we scheduled it. And you do the same thing. You schedule almost like a state of the union, right? So you're meeting, you're talking about what the money situation was there not enough to pay the bills this month? Why was that? Did someone really spend a lot more than they typically do? Because the more that your hands are in it, I'm sure you would agree with this, the more that you're looking at your bank records, seeing where the money's flowing, you're understanding it, and you're being mindful about how it's being spent. So yeah, does it suck? Of course it does. No one likes to have those conversations. It's boring, it's dry. Sometimes it brings up all kinds of old feelings of scarcity, maybe some childhood trauma, however, whatever stories that money has been in your life that comes up, but that doesn't mean you avoid it. Because
Right.
if you avoid it, it's going to come up. At some point, it's going to come up, and it may be, and at that point, it's going to be way worse to have that conversation because things have just escalated and rolled into something even bigger.
Yeah, exactly. That was something that Jason and I did right from the get-go. But admittedly, you know me, and also my husband is a massive number nerd and he loves to talk about money. Like I'm pretty sure our third date consisted of tax returns coming out. And so it was partially because it was also tax season and it was like, "Hey Shannon, can you look at this?" And I'm like, "Well, this we just cut to the chase pretty quick. Now I can see you financially naked and see what's
That's
going
so
on."
funny.
I actually think that that's a really healthy thing is to, like, sit down and, like, open up, for example, your tax returns together. I know that's my version of romance, maybe not yours listening, but it's a really healthy thing because a lot of that stuff is gonna come to the surface at some point. You might as well know before you commit a lot to this person to understand exactly what you're getting yourself into. I've seen stories of it. I'm definitely not a divorce attorney, but I do a lot of married couples tax returns, and it's always like a, "Oh, yeah, they don't have anything going on. They're just simple job, whatever." And then the husband or the wife or the spouse gives me their stuff, and it's like, "Did you know they made 80K in crypto this year?" And they're like, "No, I didn't know that." And I'm like, "Y'all need to talk." Like,
Yeah.
y'all need to have conversations because it affects each other. It really does, and it's not just in the name of, like, marriage divorce. I've seen this happen with estates too. Like, the husband or the wife handled all, like, in most cases in this generation, the husband handled all the money stuff. This was my father-in-law, and my mother-in-law is now like, "I don't even know how to log into the bank account." Like, I don't know how to get access to the money, and that is terrifying.
Yeah.
So, I can't emphasize that enough, Renee, is, have that conversation, be on the same page with where your money's at.
And you know what? To point out, like, it is still common that this is happening
Yeah,
because I'll hear sometimes people be like, "Well, no, in this day and age, and it's not happening." It is. I
it
have a
is.
good friend who is highly educated, and she's on this real in this, she's in a bad place and at a crossroads. And she's in that same exact place where she's like, I never handled it. I never had to. I just deposited my paycheck and I let him pay everything. And it every level of education, like, this is still happening in households, and sometimes it's the woman who manages the money,
Yeah.
and that's true too, but, in that regard, it's like both of you really have to take the time and effort to understand and know.
Yeah, it's in the name of trust. It's like, well, of course I trust him to do it,
Yeah.
and that's not quite in question. It's about just being engaged. So it's about like, I trust you to do it, but could we still do a monthly review of like what got done or where we're at, or just like you said, a state of the union? Like, I don't have to hover over your shoulder, but can we communicate about what's actually going on so I'm aware, and building that awareness around what's happening too, even if you are teaming up and taking on certain responsibilities.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So let's talk about other things. We talk about communication, the conversation. There's always talk of like prenups, and there's this talk of contracts and other agreements. Now, as a lawyer, you're very familiar with this. What are some of the things that you can do to, again, not only ensure a happy, healthy marriage, but to make sure that, nothing goes wrong?
So, having the prenup conversation is important.
Hmm.
Now, I know I've had pushback on this where I say not everyone needs a prenup. And it really depends on where you are in your life. If you've ever been married before and this is a second or third marriage, you need a prenup. You need to put things into place. And because often people are coming in with other children and you want protections for those children. And people feel like it's not romantic and they want to plan the wedding and the honeymoon. Well, this is planning your life. And when you get these conversations out of the way up front, then you don't have to worry about them later on. So that's really important. Now, if you're two early 20s, your kid getting out of college, you don't have anything, maybe you don't need a prenup. Maybe, but it depends.
Yeah.
It depends on what your families, if there's wealth from your families, are there inheritances that maybe down the line? Like, it really depends. And it's worth at least having a conversation with a lawyer to say, okay, is this something that we need to think about? Something I once saw in a prenup, which is crazy to me, is that this couple had a prenup where they actually had how much weight the woman was, yeah, right. You're looking at me. How much weight she could gain in the marriage that it didn't have to do with pregnancy. And it was written in there that she was expected to maintain a certain weight range, which
Nope.
blows
Nope.
my mind.
Are
And Shannon,
they
so
still married?
I have no idea. And I'll never forget sitting down with her. And this was a while ago. She was from the Greenwich area. And I was like, "Do not sign this thing. Do not walk down the aisle." Like, I didn't say that, but, it was like, "Do not sign this thing," because it was filled with, I mean, if that's in there, you can imagine what else was in there.
Yeah.
But all she cared about was the African safari that they were going on for their honeymoon for a month. And I was just like, and the point is, pay attention, like, don't just look at it with rose-colored glasses and we're in love and nothing bad's gonna happen and we have this beautiful wedding, like, really look at it from a practical, like, put your thinking cap on and say, "Okay, let's really look at this and make sure this makes sense and we're both comfortable with it," and before you make that decision.
Yeah, and the trend has been lately that people are waiting to get married. You know,
Yeah.
like Jason and I got married in our late 20s, early 30s. And when we did that, like again, if you're having your first marriage in your 30s and 40s, you've accumulated something. Like
Yeah.
you're typically either a business owner, a high level executive, you might have kids already, you might have whatever it is. So if you're getting married in that age range. So you got to be careful about, you're bringing an entire whole human being and lifestyle and household to the table and so are they. And you have to be sure about, okay, this is the partnership. And I look at it as a business agreement, honestly. And I'm so thankful both of us come from business because we made it really logical and not emotional when we said, hey, we have to have a contract because, like, neither one of us will do anything without a contract or exchange any type of money or anything without something in writing as business owners. So, and this goes for your business too. This is literally the conversation I have with partners. Like, yes, I know she's your best friend. I know you guys are going to have a great idea and you're going to have a great business together. But just in case this whole roommate situation doesn't work out, like let's just have this like little agreement that says what will happen if it doesn't work out or how people are going to get paid so no one resents each other. And it doesn't have to be that, Sheldon Cooper roommate agreement specific, right? Like you remember that from Big
I
Bang Theory?
Oh, yeah. Leave
Yeah.
Sheldon alone.
I know.
We love
I
Sheldon.
love Sheldon. But his roommate agreement, I always joke around and say you have to get so specific and you have to literally while you are happy, this is my what we did and what worked for us and what works in business for my clients is while you're happy, actually sit down and go, what could go wrong? Like
Yeah.
in a fantasy land of how could I screw you? How could you screw me in an abstract, like it's not going to happen, but like what are the different ways that this could go wrong? And have we prevented that in here? Have we
Yeah.
secured our marriage in here? Have we locked it down? Have we protected it using this agreement? That's the approach that we took. And I wouldn't project that on anybody else. It's everyone's own journey, right? But I think that there's something to be said about whether it's in writing or not, actually having that conversation and putting it out there on, what the intentions are and how it's going to work for you guys.
So Jay and I still joke that I think it might have been our second date that we sat across from each other. And listen, I had 2 divorces under my belt, so I knew, like I was so clear,
Yeah.
like I am not messing around.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to waste my time, I'm not going to waste your time. I'm not looking to get married, like just be clear there, but I'm also my time is valuable. Like I sat there with my mental checklist of all of the things. Like if I open up your medicine cabinet, what will I see? Like what bottles will I mean, like
Ooh.
we're talking about like like religion, like I went there because I'm like, I'm not getting into a situation where our values are not aligned and things are and I'm like, I've been through too much already. So it's the same thing with with money, with debt, with your spending habits, all of that.
Yeah.
And it worked. It worked. It didn't scare him off. And we've been married. We're going on 8 years now. So
Wow. You know what's really funny? This is gonna sound silly, but I do this with clients. I'm like, what am I gonna
yeah,
find when I open your financials? Like, what am I gonna see? What are we dealing with here? It's any relationship. If you're
yeah,
willing to just kind of put your values out there and say, this is what I truly value, are you aligned with that? It not only attracts the people that are and repels the people who aren't, but it actually makes you more attractive, I think, when you're super sure about this is what I'm looking for. Are you
yeah,
in or you out kind of
yeah.
attitude. Let's go back to the separate accounts thing because I think this is interesting.
Yes.
There's a lot of controversy over should we have shared bank accounts? Should we have separate bank accounts? Should we have a combination? What's the right answer? Right? People always want guidance on this. I feel like everyone kind of knows what works for them, but what are you giving in terms of advice or what are you seeing among your clients in terms of what's working, what isn't?
I have a strong opinion on this. I think everyone should have separate bank accounts and separate credit card. Now, you can have joint too. So you can absolutely have a joint bank account, but it's so important for each person to establish some individual credit. And I have seen over and over again, and I speak because it's usually women who do this. They'll throw their name, they'll close their cards when they get married. They'll throw their name on their husband's credit card, and they're like, "Well, that's my credit card." I'm like, "But it's not. It's not yours." So often they haven't built up any sort of credit or they don't have access to their own money and they're going to their spouse asking for permission for money. So I think it is so important for each person in that relationship to establish some sort of financial independence. Yes, you can combine some things. You can have that joint stuff. You can figure out how bills are getting paid and put money into one account and pay bills from that joint account, but also have your own separate money, because there is nothing worse than having to make a decision based on what you know is right and what your heart is telling you, and you're being tied because of finances. So you have a little bit of financial independence where you can tap into that if you ever need it. I mean, it's so common for someone to be like, "Well, I want to hire you, but I don't have access to any of the money." And so now they have to go get a court order in order to pull money out because their spouse went and took their name off of the account. Or they go and open up a credit card and they have to charge it, but then they don't have enough credit to actually charge the full retainer. And or they're borrowing from parents. But if they have this all along, then they won't have that problem. And it gives them a little bit more flexibility to do what they actually think is right for them, rather than being forced into a decision or not a decision based on just fear of not having enough money.
And I think especially when you have maybe one spouse who takes the reins on managing the finances day to day, which I think that typically it's not a two-person job to pay the bills or to do all these things. So
Right.
somebody's probably transacting more than the other. And it's really important that, in my opinion as well, that if you're going to do that, that you don't commingle all of the money, because now you don't know where it's coming from, how much you're actually bringing in, how much cash flow you need from what party in order to sustain the household. So it literally for me is just tracking income streams. It's going, what's coming in from Jason, what's coming in from Shannon, and what is the state of every person's bank account, every bank account we own. And each of us have like three different bank accounts for different things going on. And I've never closed bank accounts, I just kept them from when I was a kid, but, like, I still have my bank account I had in college, and it's so important to me to see my bank account and know, like, that's how much money I make, I spend, I make, I spend, so that independently, we know we are healthy in terms of how we make and spend money, but also, we do this thing every quarter. Now, we're nerds, okay? Like, I know. We're nerds, but every quarter we do this like State of the Union thing where I actually pull up my spreadsheet. We do a net worth calc. So we figure out our net worth every quarter. And yes, it's fun when you have a decent big net worth. Like it's fun to do like that. But if it's, you know, when you look at your assets, you look at your cash, you look at what you own, I think people underestimate how much money they actually have or how much money they have access to. They don't realize like all the different pockets of places between your retirement savings and your savings accounts and all the stuff that you're not touching every day. You go, "Oh, we actually have more than I thought we did." And it's nice to put eyeballs on that every so often to see where you stand, but also see what's going up, what's going down. And if for any reason Jason's bank account went down by like 50 grand in a quarter, I'd be like, "Babe, what was that?" Like,
Right.
what was that thing? What was that fluctuation? And we have conversations around it. So I think that the numbers speak for themselves. You don't have to stress out over it too much. You just got to pull up the bank accounts, put them on paper, and say, "Okay, this is what we have right now." I know it sounds a lot simpler than it is, though. A lot of people,
No, I love it. I love a good Excel sheet.
yeah,
And I'm not like, I am the person who is not the numbers, like the
yeah.
numbers nerd. I'm not, but I do love a good Excel sheet. So I
I
can
love a good spreadsheet.
totally appreciate that. And I
Yeah.
have so many of them going for so many different reasons. But I
Mhm.
actually love that one because while I have all of them going for business, I actually don't have one for my personal. And that just made me think, well, why don't we? Because that's so simple to do,
Yeah,
right?
even
I love
twice
that.
a year, check in, like, where do we stand right now in our net worth? Are we putting our money we actually what we do is we tie it to goals. So we say, is our money moving in the direction that we want it to be moving in? Like, do we have a bunch of money in savings earning jack all interest, or should we put that into property? Should we put that into real estate or another investment? Like, are we really earning the money we should be in our investment portfolio? Like, what are we actually doing here? We actually found out that our investment advisor was not investing our money the way we told him to by doing these check-ins. Like you again, we go back to trust the professionals but verify. Trust but verify, even with your loved one, even with the professionals. If you just say they know better than me and you put the blindfold on, it's a lot of risk because everyone's human.
Yeah.
Everybody's human and they can make mistakes, but they can also, not be acting in your best interest, which is why I think it's so important to have that sort of oversight.
Well, what I love about with this model that you're coming up with is not only just looking at your net worth, but looking at your spending habits, because
Mhm,
there are definitely months where I'm like, "Ooh, I might have swiped a little too much this month." But
same.
having that on, like, as part of that analysis, you pay attention to it. Like, I know my credit card the last month, I'll just be frank, was way higher than it typically is, and I'm like, "Okay, now we're gonna be so mindful over the next few months so that that doesn't happen, and over the year, it all evens out." But
Mhm.
it's like paying attention to that.
And you know where I got that was frickin' Weight Watchers
Hmm.
because I w
I did Weight Watchers too back in the
back
day.
in the day, though, when I had the paper thing, you had to go to the grocery store and figure out what the
Yeah.
friggin' points were. So I did and I got that habit from that because I got used to budgeting because of Weight Watchers. So I'd be like, "I cannot have a margarita," because I'm like, "That's way too many points." But if I had a margarita, I'm like, "Cool, I have to eat chicken breast for the next week to balance this out because it was a toxic program. Like,
Yeah, totally.
it was a completely
Totally.
like, I can have 1 Milky Way, but I can't eat the rest of the day. Okay, great. Like, again, not great habits built from that, but I'm saying that it built this mentality of awareness of, like, when I, quote, unquote, "splurge," I have to be conscious of the fact that, "Hey, that was an exception, not the norm, so I kinda have to balance this out with a little bit of good decisions to make up for that," and that kind of helped me with the mentality behind it. Funny enough, somebody who actually studied money hates budgeting, but I'm like, "Oh, but Weight Watchers, this is basically a budget." Go figure.
Wait,
Can't
we probably went to the same Weight Watchers in Massachusetts too. That's where I went.
I didn't go in person. I had did, like,
Ah, okay.
the at home or whatever it was at the time. But, this it brings me back to the I cannot believe someone put in a prenup how much weight someone could gain.
Isn't that
Then
crazy?
my in case no one saw the video of me, my face had all the judgment in the world.
Yeah,
I was like it's so funny because 'cause I'm going, "Well, to each their own," but oof, yeah, they need
yeah.
to be careful with that stuff. And let's talk about when it comes to whether it's marriage, divorce, or really anything where you know that in your gut, there's something that is not really clicking, it's not aligned, something's off, and maybe you haven't even identified it yet. And you did a great job of this in your keynote where you were kind of extracting that out of everyone in the room and saying, like, what is the thing that you've been putting off that you know you got to do, the band aid you got to rip off, right? The next chapter you need to start. How do you navigate, Renee, the like, because you've done this in relationships, but also in other aspects of your life, in business and pivots and other things. How do you navigate this idea, this itch to end a chapter and start a new one, and the fear around, "What does it mean if I have to end this chapter?"
There's so much fear around it.
Mm,
It all comes back to when you make that decision. And I've had over the past 20 years people who come in, and a lot of them ask the same question. It's like, how do you know? And they wanna know, like, how do you know when it's the right decision? And what's the right decision? And when's the right timing? And the thing is they already do know. Like, the fact that they're sitting in that office, what they're doing is they're looking for validation on the outside, and so they're crowdsourcing. They're asking friends, and they're asking family, and they're asking divorce lawyers, and they're asking anyone who might give them the information that they think they need to hear, but they really already know that. So that it's a gut check, right? It's the red flag. It's the thing that's keeping you up at night. My friend that I talked about, it was 2 years ago that she knew something was up. And here we are 2 years later and still in that same place. Like, she knew. So it's knowing and actually taking that leap is where it's like, the rub is, because often people get stuck and because they're afraid of doing that. And I say sometimes you just have to jump, and you're not going to know where you're going to land. You don't have to have it all worked out, but you know that it's going to be better than the condition that you're in right now. Like, it has to be. If you're in that place where you're so miserable or so unhappy or so stuck or joyless or just kind of going through life like eyes glazed over, then it's time to make that decision. And when I got divorced the first time, I had just started my business the year before. Like, I was literally working on a folding table. I think I had maybe 8 total clients, 2 or 3 of them which were the state, which meant I was making like state rates. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I just have to figure it out. And it was scary as all hell, but, what it did is it forced me to look down and say, "Okay, how can I grow my business quicker? Because I can't just let things roll in. How can I really be a business owner? How can I really, market things?" And you figure that stuff out, and It's so sad to me when someone is 20 years in a marriage and they said, "Well, we were unhappy ever since our, little Johnny was 2, and here we are, he's getting married now and they're still in it." I'm like, "Wow, there's so much life that you just lost. What if you took that leap 20 years ago? And what would have happened?
Mhm.
You would have landed on your feet." And sometimes it's just, you don't know where it's going to go and you just jump and it works out. It always works out.
Yeah.
It always like the money is always the thing that keeps people stuck in bad marriages. It always works out, even if it means you have to downsize your house or your lifestyle, or you can't go on 4 vacations. You only can go on one, and maybe it's domestic vacation and not you're not traveling Europe. Like happiness is worth so much more than stuff in a big house and luxury.
Yeah, and there's the fear of uncertainty. It's the fear of, especially the longer you've been in, let's say it's a marriage, this can also apply to any business, any relationship,
Hmm.
but the longer you've been in it, the more comfortable it is, and the more easy it is to wake up and go through the routine every day. But the question is, what are you missing out on by doing that? Number 1, and number 2, why are you afraid of trading in for better, or why are you afraid of running the risk of being happy?
Or being
And
alone.
or being alone. But here's the other thing, like, you were alone before.
Yeah.
Like, you've survived 100% of days you were alone.
Yeah.
You've survived
Yeah.
100% of every day you felt uncertain. I kinda use this, I know it's not the same feeling, but, I mean, hell, you're afraid of making a life-altering decision and dipping into uncertainty. Y'all, we were asked to choose college majors when we were 17.
No kidding.
Like,
I know.
talk about a
I'm
life-altering
watching
decision.
my I'm watching my son go through that now. I'm like, "You're 17. How can you possibly be expected to know what you wanna do?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the same goes, like, if you're getting married, even if you're getting married young, old, whatever, it's, you know, your desires, your ambitions change and evolve. You become different
Yeah.
people, and that is okay. You reserve the right to get smarter and learn. You reserve the right to become a new person and reevaluate if that person that you are with should be with
Yeah.
the person you are now.
Yeah.
And a lot I see a lot of people grow apart naturally, like you said, amicably, but they say, "When we got married, we were high school sweethearts, we were of this mindset, we were in this position, and we've just grown into different people who are looking for different things." And that's okay. And I think there's just a lot
Yeah.
of shame around in our society around this, like, if you can't make a marriage work, that you're somehow a problem, or that there's a negative
Yeah.
connotation. And I actually look at it as bravery to make the call and say, "You know what? I'm gonna take my chance on happiness. I'm gonna take my chance on
Yeah.
something better that I deserve." And, and even then, who says it's permanent? You can always get back together. You could always, rekindle. You could always decide. But it's such a rocky road with marriage and everything too. And I can't speak from experience. I've been married to Jason for 6 years next month, and, you know, see no end in sight in terms of that,
Mhm.
but, I love my husband dearly. We have a very similar mindset about this stuff, and
Yeah.
always say, "Hey, if anything is not going well, like, we talk." You
Yeah.
have to have that open conversation.
And sometimes relationships just come to completion and they served a purpose
Absolutely.
and they were a season. And I look at and I you've heard some of the specific details of my really toxic second marriage. And I have absolutely no regrets around that.
I
And like
wouldn't either.
someone thinks I'm crazy, but I'm like, you know what? Having experienced that, I showed up. I was able to serve my clients in a different way because there was a different level of empathy that I did not have before.
Yes.
Because now I could sit there and be like, I get it. Like, I know how bad it is. And I learned from that because I became so crystal clear on what it actually was that I needed out of a relationship and wanted and what my values were. So when I met Jay and put him through that that interrogation, but it actually we're so aligned because of
Mhm.
that. So, relationships serve a purpose and it's okay to let go and not hold on to it just because you have a legal piece of paper that says, well, we committed to this at some point when when things were different and we've, now it's time to move on. Like it's okay. And so much of this conversation is like just releasing that shame around that. It's okay. Like when I was getting divorced, I was So much of, me prolonging it was because I didn't want to bring shame to my parents. And it was like, "Oh, we planned this huge Boston wedding, and why can't you just be happy?" And at some point you have to, it's not about them. It's not about who you tell. It's not about even the kids are going to be just fine. It's about you choosing your own happiness so you can be the best parent for your kids and model the relationship that you want them ultimately to have. And I'll say to clients all the time, if this was your daughter, what would you tell her if this was her relationship? And every single person will say, "Well, I tell her to leave." Well, why is it why is it okay for her to make that decision, but not you?
Right. That's interesting. I love that because we're so afraid to make decisions for ourselves, but we're
Mhm.
so good at, judging others and telling them what they should do
Yeah.
and speaking from the outside. So Renee, you have the book coming out. You have the She Who Wins Summit. Now the book is called She Who Wins. What is the full title? Just say that for everyone listening.
Yes. So it's she who wins. Ditch your inner good girl, overcome uncertainty, and win at your life.
I love it. What does winning mean for you?
So winning means I wake up every single day and I am at peace and have joy in my life. And it doesn't need to be all excitement, but it needs to be peaceful. And I need to have some comfort in the sense of the comfort of the person that I'm with. And I like what I do. And I'm just happy. If nothing in my life ever changed, I'd be so happy with exactly the life that I have. And that's where I am now. And that's what winning means to me.
I absolutely love that. I can't disagree with that definition at all. Do you feel like you're winning right now?
I absolutely feel like I'm winning.
I love
I
it.
I have yeah, it just I'm connected to so many amazing people. I'm having conversations like this. I do what I love. I write, which is, I was a writer before I was anything else. Like I have a marriage that is beautiful, that I would call it, that so aligned and definitely not perfect. I'm not going to say that, "Oh, it's not." Relationships do take work, but it is the perfect relationship for us. And so, yeah, I'm winning all the way right now.
I love it. Where can people find out more about She Who Wins, about what you do, and just what you have going on?
Yeah, so Instagram's kind of my favorite place to hang out since Facebook kicked me off because I was hacked.
That
So
was
head
that was ridiculous, guys. Oh
That's
my
another
god.
story.
Yeah.
But you can find me over there at Ms. Renee Bauer, or shewhowinsbook.com is where all of the book info is.
Amazing. When is that coming out?
September 5th.
Amazing. Pre-order your copy. She's crushing it with the pre-orders right now. I've heard such great things about the book. I need to grab my copy as well. And for those of you listening, if you would share your biggest takeaway from today, anything that you extracted from Renee and I's conversation, even if it's not about divorce particularly, but you had something that kind of clicked, a decision that you've been mulling over, something that you need to go take action on now, share it with us on social media. Let us know that you resonated with that, and I'm going to be grabbing a couple of you guys and sending you a copy of Renee's book when it comes out because I would love to share more of it with people. Renee, thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing all of your knowledge with those listening.
Thank you, Shannon.
If you're an entrepreneur who's just starting out, it can be overwhelming to think about all the responsibilities you have when it comes to financial management and taxes. Even if you've been binging this podcast, implementing all of it can be really stressful if you don't have a clear list of action steps and know exactly what you should be doing right now. Luckily, we organized all of this for you in the Business Financial Quick Starter. This is your one-stop shop for beginning steps of entrepreneurship so you can build your business confidently from day one. This is not me teaching accounting, no way. It's a specific set of essential action steps to save you a lot of time, money, and headaches as you embark on your own entrepreneurship journey. We cover everything from setting up your business bank account all the way through avoiding a surprise tax bill. Now, as a podcast listener, you get 10% off with code KEEPWHATYOUEARN, all one word. So dive in now and access your Business Financial Quick Starter. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and review on your podcast platform. This small action goes a long way for podcasters to get our message heard by more business owners just like you. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to information about our guests and ways to get in touch with me. We'll see you on the next episode.